3, 2, 1. Here we go.
All right. Summary.
Welcome. Summaries.
Yeah.
This one, I feel like it's harder to summarize something that's short. Because this chapter is only like 10 pages for the conclusion of Make Me. I just hit myself in the head with the book. I under anticipate how wide my head is with these headphones for the podcast.
Yeah.
Anyways, if you're listening, thankfully you missed that. Anyways, I was like, we started off like so quick, so efficient. No.
Man, then you hit yourself in the face with a book.
Segue.
Okay. There we go.
Let's summarize this conclusion chapter. Then next week, our podcast episode is all about like the book in general. And then we have our interview.
Yes. So if you want to watch, I think we're doing it live, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you want to watch, we're going to interview Eric Toshalis, the author of Make Me, March 13th at 4 p.m. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's going to be an awesome interview. I've got really good questions I want to ask him. And we wanted to get questions from the audience, didn't we?
Yeah, we do. So if you have some, message them to us at Ignited Podcast. And I'm going to put their handle in my comments for this live. And you probably should for yours too, Britt.
My
Ignited Podcast's handle.
Oh, yeah, I got you. Is it underscore?
Ask your questions of Eric here. I don't know about you, but do you say things when you're typing it?
I narrate my entire life.
I sing a lot of my life, which you found out when you came to visit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I sing a lot.
Send all questions to this account. Okay, so I got you.
You ready to start that timer for me?
Yep.
Let's do it.
All right, so we are going to start off with our 2-minute summary of the summary chapter. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. There we go.
All right. So in chapter 13, the conclusion, it's called Resistance is Hope. And it summarized the book overall, but of course, it also talked about how resistance can be viewed as this hopeful thing and not just this thing that we are like begrudgingly dealing with, right? And so the way that Toshalis examined that is by showing how resistance does not mean that kids are opposed to learning. It means that they maybe don't want to learn this knowledge we're communicating. They don't want to learn it here, or they don't want to learn it from us. But doesn't mean that they are opposed to learning in general. And how student resistance also is a way to alter the learning environment for themselves, and how it's a form of engagement. It's not just all these negative things. And how student resistance is a symptom of a problem, not the problem itself, which I think sometimes we get stuck on in teaching. Like we just address symptoms, not the actual problem. How we should engage student resistance and how we can change our lens for viewing it to be more productive. How this is actually a good thing for educators, communities, in schools, and the world at large. How we can prepare ourselves to face resistance and not taking it personally when it happens, because it could definitely feel personal, but instead finding hope in it and knowing that this is just a crucial part of what we need in society to advance it and make it more equitable. And I'm done early, Britt.
Okay.
I thought I would be too. I was telling you before this podcast started, I'm like, this could be a short summary.
Yeah.
All right. You ready? I had the timer going for 30 minutes.
Woo!
You talk about this for 30 minutes, Britt? Just you summarizing?
Not coherently. Okay.
Somewhat chaotically. All right. You ready?
Yeah.
Go.
Okay, so Toshalis did a really good job just summarizing all of the main parts of the book. But what he hit home in this chapter was definitely that student resistance is necessary for an equitable society. That we want to engage resistance if we want to if we want the population that is willing to fight to change the things that are wrong with our country or with the systems that exist in it. He really emphasized that resistance is almost it's a form of love and passion, knowing that that it could be different, that it could be better, and that when students engage in resistance, they're communicating that they recognize that. And when we shut that down, we not only break a relationship or a potential for a relationship, and we not only, um, but we also break trust, right? Because if we are participants in this system, this educational system, and we refuse to acknowledge the issues that exist in it, and then we tell students that they shouldn't acknowledge it either, or they shouldn't act out against it, what what type of trust are we instilling between us and the students? We have to start acknowledging, we have to start resisting with kids.
All right.
Yeah.
I like it. Your summary may have also been a little bit skewed on timing because I accidentally canceled out the timer
That's
when you were in
hilarious.
the middle of it, but
Okay.
that was mostly 2 minutes.
Yeah. All
So,
right.
from this chapter, I know that we were talking before it started about how you really resonated with the whole resistance is love
Mhm.
thing. Can you
Yeah.
explain that a bit more for us, especially people who have not read the chapter?
Yes. So he talks about, and I have it bookmarked. He talks about resistance as love, and he's got such a good quote. I had it bookmarked. Okay. Um, by Paulo Freire. Um, and if you don't know Paulo Freire's work, he was an educational philosopher and an advocate for equitable education. He has a really well-known book, The Pedagogy of the Oppressed, and he contributed a lot of work to the understanding that the education system that exists in America, it perpetuates poverty and perpetuates systemic like systemic poverty and systemic stratification or societal stratification, where it's really hard to climb the societal ladder. So Paulo Freire once wrote, "One of the most important tasks of critical educational practice is to make possible the conditions in which the learners, in their interaction with one another and with their teachers, engage in the experience of assuming themselves as social, historical, thinking, communicating, transformative, creative persons, dreamers of possible utopias, capable of being angry because of the capacity to love." And I thought that is a beautiful quote and a
Yeah,
beautiful way to think about resistance.
it's poetry.
It is, because that's at the heart of student resistance, is that they care,
Mm-hmm.
like
And
they
that
have.
can make it feel so much less triggering for you
Mhm.
too, as the adult trying to navigate it.
Yep,
You
absolutely. Meet
know?
it with empathy.
Yeah. And when you view a kid and them in their resistance with an asset-based lens, it changes the way you are neurologically going to respond to the situation and then how you feel in the
Mhm.
classroom. Like you create those better brain circuits.
Yep. Yeah.
Um, which also kind of leads me to the part that I really resonated with here, which is not taking resistance personally, even when it is. And this is something I talk to educators about every single day inside of my DMs. You know, if you are, and this is completely fine to like message us like this, but
Mhm.
if you're messaging and you're saying like these kids are so disrespectful, then like from our perspective, we're already thinking like, okay, like we're missing something here then.
Yeah.
you know. So even though resistance and like these behaviors, they can be really challenging to navigate, and like Tashalis points that out too, like it's a lot for educators to juggle. But their resistance is not personal. Even when it feels like, even when they're in your face and they're like, well, F you, it's still
Mhm.
not personal. And then
Right.
the quote I wanted to share from that comes from page 308. And this is for people who are like, what do you mean that's not personal, Ashlyn and Britton? Like, that sounds
Mhm.
very personal to me.
That sounds
But
personal.
listen to this. It says, we become a target for the students' opposition, not necessarily because we represent what's wrong, though sometimes we do, but because we're the ones standing there when students have finally had enough. Their impulsivity in expressing their resistance and their immaturity in deciding to make us its target are developmentally and politically appropriate because they're young. And I also want to add on to this and be like, even as adults, we take things out on people like this. You know,
Mhm.
like Karen's at the grocery store, how we talk about like a principal who says something that we disagree with, when we know, like, okay, the cashier is not responsible for this, or the principal is not
Mhm.
actually responsible for this, coming from the district or the board or
Yeah.
whatever, and we have fully developed brains.
Right.
Like this is a developmentally appropriate expectation of kids,
Yeah.
and we talked about it inside one of my group coaching sessions like 2 weeks ago. Like, just like you would expect a baby to start walking, you should expect a middle schooler to start resisting.
Mhm.
And just like you're like, oh, they hit this milestone when they start to resist. And it
Mhm.
might not be as cute and fun as baby's first steps or baby's first words, but
Yeah.
baby's first resistance is a developmental milestone. Let's make some
Yep.
ordinance. That could be another
Yeah. Yep.
related shop thing.
Babies. Yep.
Baby's first resistance.
Yes.
I'm writing it
Celebrate.
down.
Yeah. So when we think about it as a developmentally appropriate step, we engage with it differently because it becomes less of a conflict issue and more of a teaching issue. And which he says in this chapter, like specifically ways to engage resistance. I know that I have I actually got myself in some trouble. Like helped students organize. Like that teach these kids how to give themselves a voice within their school. You have kids that
Yeah.
are resisting a lot, give them an avenue to get their thoughts out,
Mic
to
them
talk.
up.
Yeah,
Mic them up.
and so that they feel like they can enact change on their environment because that's really what it comes down to is a loss of autonomy, like a loss of
Yeah.
control and having things constantly done to them
Hmm.
in an environment that is inequitable or is stifling or is uncomfortable or makes them feel like they don't belong. Like, so the more we can give kids autonomy with their resistance, they'll stop taking it out on us personally and start directing the energy into more productive ways to create change.
Yeah. And like you just change how the conversation goes if you meet it differently.
Hmm.
Like even like I'm thinking of something as simple as a kid who's like, I hate this. This is stupid. And like they slam their work on their desk, going over and
Mhm.
being like, stop it. What are you doing? Versus being like, what's the most stupid part?
Right,
Like
right.
it's a whole different conversation. And they'll be like, well, this, it's stupid that I have to do this and this and this. Okay. And like you can figure things out from there,
Mhm.
and also like I was thinking just last night of this story. I'm gonna forget some of the details, but I had a student last year even who had like a big like behavioral episode. And I forget exactly what they said, but like I know they were not speaking in like a respectful way. And they wouldn't typically have addressed me like that. They didn't cuss me out or anything, but like I know they don't typically
Mhm.
talk to me like that. And in the moment, we just talked more about like what their goal was to achieve, like what are they actually trying to achieve.
Mhm.
And I gave them like the words to say to achieve what they wanted to do, and it had nothing to do with me. But then later on that day, after the kids left, they came back into my room and they thanked me for that conversation. They're okay, like, also, I'm sorry, like, I know I took it out on you, and like I said those things to you, but like it wasn't about you. Like I was just upset about this. I'm like, oh, I know,
Mm-hmm.
but like I really appreciate you saying that.
Mm-hmm.
When you create that space too, kids are going to be more inclined to come forward and take accountability and to
Yeah.
navigate those structures with you because we're all navigating it together. And I think
Yeah.
that's also kind of what the book ended with, the need for us to partner with students. And they gave that union example
I know.
where
So good.
like this teachers union in Portland, Oregon was trying to make better teaching conditions and things were not looking in their favor. And this is in the early 2000s. And then what ended up changing things was when the students got involved
Mm-hmm.
and they joined the protest and they joined the movement.
Yep.
And how like that partnership, that's what we need to create. It's not, I always do this if you're watching, you can see my hands, like I have one hand facing the other hand.
Yeah.
It's not us versus them, it's us together versus the problem.
Yeah.
And actually, I think that might be my action step.
Yeah. I want to say, like, hop on that with understanding that we were raised in a system that squashed our resistance
Mm-hmm.
and how that translates to us being teachers in the classroom and feeling like we have no control and no power to change the things that we want to change.
Yeah.
And if we, like, it's so hard for us to model appropriate resistance because a lot of us don't resist. And a lot of us are afraid of conflict. And a lot of us don't know how. And that's because we were raised in a system that squashed our resistance instead of teaching us how. Because if we were taught how, and we were taught that resistance, like our resistance is important and it's valid as people, we wouldn't be squashing it so easily in the classroom.
Yeah.
We would see it as important and we'd know how to model it.
Mm-hmm.
So are we going to perpetuate the problem, or we can
Oh, I like that. Is that your
yeah
action step, Britt?
yeah I think that to really reflect about how your resistance was in, like, how adults around you interacted with your resistance when you were a
Mm-hmm.
kid, and how that influenced you as an adult.
Yeah.
Do you know how to resist? Do you, like, know how to organize? Do you know how to have a good conversation around conflict to solve problems with relationships or with systemic issues? Like, when we squash resistance, we are losing one of the most valuable contributors and potential engineers of problems in our classrooms and in our schools. We're losing the students' brains and their
Mm-hmm.
experiences. When we engage it, we can help them engineer solutions. And then we have a generation that can come up and be problem solvers. So that's my
Yeah.
action step.
I like it.
Yeah.
And then I guess mine, just to consolidate, is to, instead of being it us versus our students, when we face that conflict and resistance, to view it as us and our students versus the problem.
Yep.
And use that resistance as a connection point.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, our next episode is going to be a recap of the entire book. And then the episode after that is our interview with Eric. So, like we mentioned beforehand, if you're watching this in live time, please DM us any questions that you want us to ask Eric on the air at our Instagram account called ignited_podcast. And we will ask him your questions and he'll be able to answer them from the mouth of the author himself.
Yes. I'm so excited.
Me too. Well, and in the meantime, guys, we hope that you have a great week and you feel remoralized
and re-energized.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.